It began with silence, the kind that makes even the air feel cautious. Cameras froze mid-pan, journalists mid-tweet, as if no one wanted to interrupt what they couldn't quite believe. Then, out of that hush, a sound broke loose: applause. Not scattered, not polite, but raw and startled. The kind that escapes before the mind catches up. Byron Donalds, the hard-charging conservative who'd sparred with Democrats more times than anyone could count, had just done the unthinkable. He turned toward Jasmine Crockett, the freshman Democrat so often dismissed by his own side, and said the words no one expected to hear. He commended her integrity. For a heartbeat, every partisan wall trembled. Faces that usually hardened at each other softened in confusion. Phones lit up. Did that just happen? Flashed across timelines before the echo of clapping even faded. Reporters whispered that maybe, just maybe, something historic had cracked open in that room. Because in an era built on insults, one gesture of respect can sound deafening. But to understand why that single compliment felt revolutionary, you need to see what led to it. A week earlier, the same chamber was a battlefield. The hearings had dragged past midnight. Every exchange sharpened like a blade. Byron Donalds had been in his element. Fiery, unyielding, commanding headlines with soundbites that crackled across cable news. Jasmine Crockett met him word for word, her voice steady, her restraint the quiet defiance that turned frustration into focus. Cameras caught the sparks. Social media turned them into firestorms. Each clip fed the algorithm of outrage. To the public, it felt like politics had become theater, and everyone was tired of the show. Across dinner tables, in barbershops, in buses rolling through working-class neighborhoods, people sighed at yet another viral shouting match. The noise had grown so constant, even truth seemed to lose its shape. Somewhere, beneath the fatigue, a longing brewed for someone to break the pattern, even for a heartbeat. So when the next session was called, the tension was electric. Every seat filled, every reporter ready, every viewer expecting round two. The atmosphere pulsed with the same grim curiosity. Who would throw the first jab? But that day, something shifted, subtle, invisible, yet unmistakable. The air didn't hum with anger. It trembled with possibility. Everyone braced for another storm. But instead, something quietly historic happened. Byron Donalds had built his reputation the way some men build fortresses, brick by brick, soundbite by soundbite. In a Congress obsessed with headlines, he became one. His voice carried the cadence of confidence, his presence the aura of command. When he spoke, the cameras leaned in. He was a natural, charismatic, combative, unapologetically partisan. To his supporters, he was a truth-teller unafraid of political correctness. To his critics, he was a showman sculpted by the era of viral outrage. His rise wasn't quiet. From local radio panels to national debates, Donalds learned that conviction, delivered with flair, could outshine complexity. The bolder the tone, the brighter the spotlight. Cable networks loved him. His clips spiked ratings, his lines trended. He wielded certainty like a weapon, never letting silence linger long enough to invite doubt. In the age of instant takes, he was built for the moment. But the same style that made him a star also made him a target. Arrogant, performative, loud without listening. The label stuck, layered over each new appearance. Even allies whispered that sometimes his fire scorched more than it illuminated. Yet beneath the bravado was a man who hated being misunderstood. What many called arrogance was often armor, forged in a political world where vulnerability meant weakness. His encounters with Jasmine Crockett were the perfect storm of opposites. He was thunder, she was still water. Their debates crackled across timelines, each clash a masterclass in contrast. Donalds commanded attention with intensity. Crockett held it with calm precision. Once, after a particularly tense exchange, the internet declared she'd won the room. Donalds laughed it off publicly, but privately, that phrase lingered longer than it should have. Because for all his confidence, he craved something politics rarely offered: respect untainted by fear. To be seen not just as loud, but as legitimate. And Crockett, with her poise and grounded truth, represented the kind of credibility that couldn't be staged. So when fate placed them at the same table again, the air between them carried more than rivalry. It carried unfinished business. Donalds came ready for battle, every statistic memorized, every counterpoint loaded. Yet beneath the surface, a strange curiosity stirred. What if this time didn't end in noise? He didn't know it yet, but the very quality he once dismissed in her, restraint, would soon become the mirror that revealed his own reflection. He'd faced her before and lost the room. But this time, something about her composure would disarm him completely long before the cameras and the hearings. Jasmine Crockett learned to speak for those no one else would hear. In the neighborhoods of Dallas where summers were long and opportunities short, she saw what silence could cost. Her mother taught her that dignity wasn't something the world handed you. It was something you carried, even when the world tried to strip it away. That lesson became her compass. As a young attorney, she didn't chase prestige, she chased fairness. She represented tenants evicted without notice, workers cheated of wages, mothers whose sons had vanished into a system that spoke in codes no one could decipher. Her office wasn't polished marble. It was a crowded room with peeling paint and coffee that never stayed warm. But every file on her desk meant someone believed justice could still answer the phone. Even then, Crockett's strength wasn't her volume. It was her clarity. She could raise her voice when she had to, but her real weapon was precision. She didn't fight to be right. She fought to be true. And that difference made her dangerous in the best way. When she entered Congress, the spotlight followed. Not because she sought it, but because the truth has a way of finding light. In hearing rooms thick with tension, where insults flew faster than facts, Crockett became a kind of paradox. Calm yet unyielding, unbothered yet piercing. When others lost composure, she stayed rooted. When they performed for headlines, she spoke to history. But what few saw was the preparation behind that calm. The early mornings alone with notes spread across her kitchen table. The quiet moments before hearings, when she whispered a prayer not for victory, but for grace. The grounding rituals, calling her mother, rereading her favorite passages about courage and restraint, reminders that leadership isn't about overpowering the room, but owning your peace inside it. She had faced mockery, condescension, and coded dismissal, and she'd met all of it with the same weapon, poise. Each trial refined her. Each slight taught her the difference between reaction and response. Integrity, she'd come to believe, isn't built in a moment. It's earned through every storm you refuse to mirror. So when she took her seat that morning beside Byron Donalds, she wasn't there to spar. She was there to serve, to listen, to lead with composure that could not be baited. And on that day, when the nation expected sparks, she gave them silence that spoke louder than shouting. The session opened like so many before it, restless, charged, and ready to combust. Papers shuffled, microphones flickered, and the air pulsed with the familiar rhythm of rivalry. The questions came hard, framed less to uncover truth than to score points. Byron Donalds, quick on his cue, met every inquiry with the sharpness of a practiced combatant. His words hit their marks, bold, biting, designed to dominate. Jasmine Crockett, sitting across from him, didn't flinch. She absorbed the volleys, her gaze steady, her hands calm against the table. Where her turn came, she didn't match his force. She redirected it. Her answers were surgical, each sentence trimmed of ego, each point grounded in fact. No raised voice, no smirk, no spectacle. Just clarity. The contrast was magnetic. Staffers leaned in, sensing something unfamiliar. Tension without hostility, disagreement without disdain. For the first time, Donalds didn't interrupt. He listened. The camera caught the flicker in his expression, the momentary pause that betrayed something more than strategy. Respect. The exchanges continued, sharper still, yet threaded with restraint. It was as if both had decided, wordlessly, to test not who could shout the loudest, but who could hold the floor with grace. The crowd, primed for fireworks, began to quiet. The noise that usually followed every jab gave way to an unexpected hush. Somewhere between her poise and his composure, the energy in the chamber changed. The heat softened, the hostility thinned, and from across the aisle, Byron Donalds' tone, once flint and fire, began to shift. He adjusted his papers, leaned slightly forward, and spoke with a calm that no one saw coming. The tension cracked, not in explosion, but in stillness. And then, in a chamber trained to boo, something utterly unexpected broke the rhythm. Crockett waited for the noise to settle, then leaned slightly toward the microphone. Her voice was low, deliberate, the kind that doesn't compete for attention, but earns it. "Congressman," she began, "you've spoken about accountability, about holding government to the highest standard. But when accountability becomes selective, when facts bend to convenience, that isn't oversight, it's distortion." The chamber stilled. Donald shifted, his pen tapping once against his notes. She continued, her cadence steady, unhurried, precise. "We can disagree," she said, "but we can't distort the truth. Because once we do, the people we serve lose faith in both of us." There was no accusation in her tone, no triumph in her delivery, only a quiet conviction that stripped the tension of its armor. She began walking through the record, line by line, contrasting claims with evidence, rhetoric with reality. Her words didn't bite, they revealed. Each correction landed with the soft force of inevitability. And as she spoke, something subtle shifted. Even the partisan murmurs began to fade into listening. Donald, once ready to pounce, found himself still. The rhythm of debate had changed. The room no longer danced to outrage. Her composure demanded something deeper, reflection. Crockett paused after a particularly searing clarification, meeting his gaze. "Integrity," she said, "isn't about being right all the time. It's about being honest when it's hardest." That line hung in the air, heavy and magnetic. Somewhere to her left, a staffer murmured a quiet "men." The cameras zoomed in, her eyes unwavering, his expression unreadable. Seconds passed, the kind that stretch and bend time. Donalds leaned back, exhaled through a faint, almost reluctant smile. He set down his pen. "You know what?" he said, his voice low but clear enough for every mic to catch. "Congresswoman Crockett, I may not agree with you on much, but I can't deny one thing. You argue from a place of integrity. And that matters." The words dropped into the chamber like a match in still air. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The usual whisper of side comments vanished. Even the journalists stopped typing. Then came the applause, hesitant at first, like no one wanted to admit it was happening, then swelling into something genuine. Across the aisle, heads turned. Democrats clapped, Republicans half smiled, some simply nodded. For a moment, politics felt less like performance and more like people recognizing courage in someone else. Crockett didn't bask in it. She nodded once, composed, almost serene, as if to remind the room that respect, like truth, should never need celebration, only recognition. The narrator's voice broke through the collective awe. For the first time in months, respect, not rage, trended. Outside, the clip began its digital afterlife. Screens lit up across the country, the replay looping, captions flashing. Byron Donalds commends Jasmine Crockett's integrity. But inside that chamber, the moment still lingered, raw and unprocessed. The echo of clapping carried like a question no one quite knew how to answer. Because applause had become rare in that room, and rarer still for the right reasons. As the sound faded, Donalds gave a small nod, one that said you earned this, not you won. Crockett met it with silence, not out of modesty, but out of understanding. They had both stepped beyond the script, even if only for a breath. But what happened after that applause, no one saw coming. The clip hit social media within minutes. A congressional exchange, usually destined for partisan edits and outrage captions, instead went viral for a reason no one expected: respect. On X, the hashtag #IntegritySpeaks started climbing the ranks, followed closely by hashtag #RespectOverRage. By evening, both had taken over national trends. TikTok compilations showed the moment in slow motion. The pause before Donald's nod, the faint smile, the applause that seemed to surprise even those who clapped. Commentators across the spectrum couldn't help but weigh in. One conservative host tweeted, "This is how adults debate, with conviction and respect." A progressive influencer responded, "We've disagreed for years, but this gave me hope." Even late-night shows joined in. The clip played behind studio hosts, the usual sarcasm replaced by something closer to admiration. "It's sad," one said, "that mutual respect is now the most shocking thing in Washington." The audience laughed, but not cruelly. It was the kind of laughter that comes from relief, not cynicism. Reaction videos flooded YouTube. People watching the clip, pausing at the moment Donald said, "You argue from a place of integrity." Some teared up. Others whispered, "Finally, a moment that felt human." News anchors began calling it the 5-second pause that shifted the tone. Analysts debated what it meant. Was this the first spark of a new kind of politics, or just a rare lapse in the usual theater? Donalds appeared later on a morning talk show. Asked if he regretted praising his political opponent, he smiled. "Not at all," he said. "Sometimes you have to give credit where it's due. We spend so much time fighting, we forget people are watching how we fight." Hours later, Crockett posted a single message. Integrity doesn't need to shout. It just needs to stand. It wasn't defensive or triumphant, just steady, true to her form. Across the country, the moment sparked conversations in classrooms, workplaces, and dinner tables. Parents showed their kids the clip, saying, "See, that's how you disagree with grace." Civic groups quoted it. Editorials framed it as the rare instance where character went viral. The narrator reflects. In a time when outrage has become oxygen, one act of restraint reminded millions that respect still breathes. The applause had faded, the trend would too, but something lingered in the national air. A hunger for dignity, for proof that politics could still feel human. And yet, the real story wasn't the applause. It was the lesson that followed. The narrator's voice softened, steady against the hum of distant applause still echoing in memory. History doesn't always move through laws or speeches. Sometimes it shifts in seconds, and the pause before pride gives way to respect. That day, Byron Donalds and Jasmine Crockett didn't solve America's divisions. They didn't erase decades of distrust or rewrite the headlines. But in one small, unscripted moment, they reminded a weary nation what leadership looks like when stripped of ego. Donald's gesture, that simple nod, that public acknowledgement of integrity, carried more weight than 1,000 soundbites. It was an act that defied his own reputation, one that said, "Truth matters, even when it comes from across the aisle." And Crockett, composed, unwavering, showed that strength doesn't have to roar. Her calm had exposed the illusion that power belongs to those who speak loudest. She didn't win with volume. She won with dignity. The narrator continues. Integrity doesn't need a microphone. It only needs witnesses. In that chamber, witnesses weren't just those in the room, but millions watching, people desperate to believe that decency hadn't gone extinct. The applause that followed wasn't political. It was human. It sounded like relief, like recognition that the country could still see itself in the mirror and not flinch. For years, American politics had become a contest of noise, the art of interruption, the theater of outrage. But that day, a stillness cut through it, a stillness that whispered, maybe this is what we've been missing. Because decency doesn't erase disagreement, it redeems it. It turns confrontation into conversation, opposition into opportunity. It reminds us that democracy was never meant to be a shouting match. It was meant to be a shared search for truth. Maybe unity doesn't start with agreement, the narrator concludes, voice low, almost reverent. Maybe it starts with courage, the courage to applaud what's right, even across the aisle. The camera drifts upward, the chamber now empty but not silent. The echo of that applause lingers, haunting yet hopeful, like the heartbeat of a nation remembering what it could be. And for one fleeting moment, the chamber sounded like hope. In a time when shouting trends faster than truth, Byron Donalds did something few expected. He listened, and he applauded. That single moment of grace reminded us that leadership isn't about winning the noise. It's about honoring the truth when you hear it. If you believe integrity deserves to be louder than division, share this moment. Subscribe and stand with the movement, proving that respect isn't weakness. It's what leadership was always meant to be. The chamber fades to silence, two figures, one handshake, and the echo of decency still lingering in the air.